Welcome to the Deconstructionist Deep Dive.
The podcast that doesn't just accept the story,
We break it
we examine the pieces.
and expose the machinery inside. Let's dive in. So today we are really getting into it. We're tackling just this absolute behemoth of modern self-help, the Tony Robbins transformation framework.
Right. It's everywhere, isn't it? Synonymous globally with that high-energy, immediate change. The promise of, like, a fast track to mastering yourself.
Exactly. And our mission today is to trace these inherent tensions, the sort of systemic contradictions between its claim of universality. You know, the idea that anyone anywhere can just pick up these tools and run with them. And what seems to be these observed dependency structures, things that seem to, well, tether the participant right back to the charismatic leader.
And what's fascinating, I think, for you listening is that this isn't about whether it motivates people. We're doing a logical dissection here. We're analyzing the structure of the promise itself.
Yeah, the architecture.
Right. And the central question, the really crucial one we're exploring, is this. What if that pledge, that promise to eliminate suffering, isn't just philosophically maybe a bit shaky, but actually requires a structural reliance on the guru, on that charismatic authority figure, just to function?
And if that's true?
If that's true, well, it means genuine self-sufficiency, real mastery, is basically made impossible by the very design of the system itself.
It's built-in obsolescence on us.
Weird.
So yeah, we're deep diving into a structural critique, focusing hard on, I think, three core vulnerabilities.
Okay.
Methodological claims they make, the pretty significant empirical evidence gaps, and this dependency architecture that seems woven right into the core of how it all works, especially the high-impact stuff.
We're looking past the flashy testimonials, essentially.
Way past them. This is a deconstruction. We're hunting for the machinery, the gears, and critically, the vulnerabilities. The weak points that make it, well, probably an unsustainable model for real long-term self-directed change.
We want you, the listener, to walk away from this with the tools, really, to spot these kinds of contradictions, not just here, but in any self-help system you might come across.
Okay, so let's start at the very beginning. We need to unpack the theoretical foundation first, because to critique the structure, you first have to really understand the claims being sold. And some of these are audacious claims.
Oh, absolutely. They're incredibly powerful concepts promising essentially total control over your inner world.
So where does it start?
Well, the whole operational system seems built on what we're calling the human rewirability thesis.
Right.
This is the kind of non-negotiable starting point. The assertion that your neural patterns are just entirely malleable, completely flexible.
Regardless of, well, anything else.
Pretty much. Regardless of biological constraints, deep developmental history, even ingrained trauma. It's basically presenting the emotional self as, like, a blank slate, ready for instant reprogramming.
That's a staggering claim, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because it just sort of dismisses decades of study in established fields.
It really does.
We're talking things like innate temperament. Some people are just naturally more anxious or more outgoing, long-term conditioning, the reality of complex trauma history.
Yeah.
And this thesis basically asserts that all these foundational aspects of who you are, they're secondary. They just don't matter as much as the force of the immediate intervention.
And if you buy into that premise, that complete and immediate malleability, then you have to accept that fundamental parts of who you are, like how you react to what you perceive as a threat, how your nervous system handles stress, that these things can be fundamentally reversed, often like on the spot.
Wow.
Just with enough focused intention and, frankly, force. It completely bypasses the slow, often difficult, iterative work you see in traditional therapy models.
Which then flows, I guess, directly into the second big pillar, the highly marketable one.
Definitely marketable. Suffering as optional.
Right.
The framework explicitly redefines suffering. It expands it to include really common, often functional human states.
Right. So,
Things like normal stress, the frustration you feel when you hit a roadblock trying to reach a goal. Simple overwhelm when you've got too much on your plate.
okay.
By the system's logic, these are all suddenly labeled elective states. Things you choose to feel, and therefore things you can and should just terminate immediately.
That reclassification.
Yeah.
It feels very strategic, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because it instantly creates a market for their solution.
Exactly. If you're stressed because you have a looming deadline, that stress is probably functional, right? It's an evolutionary signal telling you to mobilize, to focus, maybe change your strategy.
It's useful information.
It is. But if this system tells you that feeling is optional suffering that needs to be just eradicated?
Okay.
Well, it turns a normal human experience into a personal failure, one that requires their outside help to fix.
It's like it's the difference between acknowledging the smoke alarm is blaring because there's actually smoke
Yeah.
and just ripping the alarm off the wall because the noise is annoying you. The stress signal is functional feedback. It's telling you something important.
Yeah, precisely. And when the framework insists on eliminating that signal, say in 90 seconds, it removes that necessary feedback loop, the very thing that might prompt you to make a long-term behavioral change or, fix the actual external problem.
Okay, so rewirability suffering is optional.
Yeah.
What's the third piece?
The third piece is the core organizing principle, the dualism.
Dualism.
Yeah. The system deliberately separates success, which they often call the science of achievement,
Okay.
from happiness, which they term the art of fulfillment.
So achievement and fulfillment, two different things.
Two distinct domains, according to the system. But, and this is key, they claim these two are ultimately integrable. You can merge them into one single path to mastery.
But the act of integrating them.
Yeah.
That sounds like where the problems might start, the structural tension.
Exactly. The science of achievement is oriented entirely externally. It's all about results, strategy, massive action, material success, tangible stuff.
Right. Measurable.
While the art of fulfillment is supposed to be internally oriented, state management, appreciation, inner peace, feeling good regardless of the outside world.
So the foundational promise is you can have both.
Yeah.
You could be the relentless, hyper-driven achiever and the serene, peaceful monk all at the same time.
That's the promise.
Right.
And we're definitely going to spend a good chunk of time digging into the inherent tension between those two because they seem like wildly demanding, potentially conflicting orientations.
Okay.
But for now, just hold on to that. The entire architecture is built on trying to simultaneously pursue hyperdrive external output and somehow serene internal contentment.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit from the philosophy, the promises, to the how. Methodology.
Right. If the goal is this immediate rewiring, how do they actually claim to do it?
Yeah.
The system relies really heavily on something called the pattern disruption protocol. This is basically the engine inside the transformation machine.
So they claim you have these limiting patterns like neurological ruts holding you back. How do they find them? How do they identify these patterns they want to break?
Well, identification often seems to happen through what the framework calls childhood imprint mining.
Childhood imprint mining. Sounds intense.
It's sort of a quick and frankly dirty version of digging into your past. They encourage tracing your current limitations, your emotional patterns, back to early dynamics with caregivers. Often focused around a really potent, emotionally charged question like, whose love did you crave most as a child?
Oh.
The goal is to quickly pull out the emotional root of your current behavior, linking it to those foundational childhood experiences. Make it raw, make it available right now for disruption.
So once they've surfaced this supposed pattern, how do they intervene? How do they break it?
The methods they use, well, they fall into categories that honestly really underscore the dependency on some kind of external force.
Like what?
The first big one is the charismatic jolt.
The jolt.
Yeah. This is pattern interruption via unexpected behavior or communication or even physical action, but delivered by the authority figure.
The guru.
Right. It could be sudden humor, a sharp shift in tone, a really confrontational remark, maybe even a physical intervention like a tap on the shoulder or moving you physically.
And the key is?
The key is it requires massive emotional force and perceived status from the leader. It relies entirely on their authority, their power, to basically breach your emotional defenses, to shock the system.
So that jolt creates a moment of confusion, cognitive dissonance.
Exactly. Your brain registers the shock, this unexpected input, as momentary chaos, and the framework tries to immediately fill that gap, that void, with a new, supposedly positive pattern or belief.
And because the disruption feels so visceral, so real.
It feels like a genuine transformation just happened, because the break was so sudden and forceful.
Okay, so the charismatic jolt is one method. What else?
The second main category is a physiological override.
Physiology, so the body.
Exactly. Using your body state to alter your mental or emotional state, think big, sudden changes. Intense breath work, rapid movement, changing your posture dramatically, like power posing, chanting, high fives, even primal screams.
Okay, and this is grounded in some real science, right?
Yeah.
Change your body, change your brain signals.
It is grounded in real neurobiology, absolutely. If you change your physical state, you send different signals to your brain. But the application here is often extreme. It's focused on generating immediate, peak emotional states, really high highs.
So it creates an instant high-octane shift, which the participant then registers as, wow, a profound breakthrough.
Right. Even if the underlying, maybe more subtle neural architecture, the part that manages your day-to-day stress response, for instance, hasn't actually shifted permanently.
Got it. So jolt physiology.
Mm-hmm.
Feels like it's leading somewhere specific.
It absolutely is. It brings us right to the centerpiece of the whole methodology, the most specific, the most testable, and frankly, the most problematic assertion in the entire blueprint.
Which is?
The 90-second claim.
Ah, yes. The 90 seconds. This feels like the first logical firewall we really need to examine closely, because it offers this ultimate quantitative promise, doesn't it?
It really does. Emotional states, suffering, fear, anger, whatever, can be voluntarily terminated, switched off, and replaced within 90 seconds.
90 seconds.
Just through conscious pattern interruption, using these techniques.
Well, it's incredibly specific. But is it arbitrary?
It seems profoundly arbitrary, yet it sounds so definitive, doesn't it? It's quantitative, it sounds almost scientific, and crucially, it immediately sets an expectation for your performance.
Meaning?
Meaning, if your negative emotional state lasts longer than 90 seconds, well, you failed the test. You didn't apply the tool correctly.
Not that the tool itself might be flawed.
Exactly. We really have to stop and ask, why 90 seconds? Is there any biological validation for that specific time frame?
And the answer is?
No. Not really. It seems like a clean, highly marketable promise designed to just eliminate all the nuance of human emotion.
Because emotional neurochemistry is complex, right? It's not an on-off switch.
Not at all. When you have a genuine emotional spike, let's say real fear or intense anger, you trigger a cascade of hormonal releases. Cortisol, adrenaline, norepinephrine.
Stuff that lingers in the system.
Right. These hormones have a biological half-life. They don't just vanish from your bloodstream because you mentally decided they should 90 seconds ago. Your body has to actually metabolize them.
So this time frame just bypasses the complexity of established neuroscience. And evolutionary psychology, too.
Completely. Think about the amygdala, your brain's initial threat detector. It might fire off quickly, yeah. But the full hormonal and somatic response, the feeling in your body, especially from deep trauma or entrenched fear, that takes significantly longer to metabolize and resolve.
The promise is you can just hit reset on your autonomic nervous system.
Which is just not how that system is engineered to function. It's designed for survival, not instant overrides on demand.
So by setting up this 90-second rule, the system creates this fantastic paradox for the participant, doesn't it?
It really does. On one hand, it offers immediate relief. You are in control. You can switch off pain in 90 seconds.
Which sounds amazing.
Of course. But simultaneously, it establishes a structural failure mechanism. If the state hangs around for 91 seconds or 5 minutes or an hour, the responsibility shifts entirely onto you.
You're failing the system.
Rather than questioning whether the system's core premise, that 90-second claim, is empirically flawed from the start, it neatly deflects criticism away from the method and onto the user.
Okay, let's move on to dissecting the system's overall architecture. You mentioned earlier it's built on 2 demanding pillars.
That's right. And understanding their conflicting demands, I think, is absolutely crucial to seeing the inherent volatility of the whole system.
So pillar 1 is?
Pillar 1 is the science of achievement, and it is defined by an almost absolute external orientation.
External, meaning focused on the outside world.
Completely. This is the language you hear in like aggressive business strategy, military planning, peak athletic performance. It's about conquering the external world.
And what does that involve practically?
Its focus areas demand incredible, almost relentless, sustained intensity. First, there's strategic modeling of successful individuals.
Okay, copying winners.
Basically, reverse engineering excellence, which demands constant observation, analysis, focus on others. Second, massive action plus continuous adaptation.
Massive action. That sounds exhausting.
It's meant to be. A relentless bias toward rapid, unrelenting movement, doing. And critically, third, obsessive focus and emotional intensity. Really dialing up the drive.
And all driven by?
All driven by an external result orientation. It's about getting the promotion, making the money, hitting the target. Measurable external success. This pillar is designed to optimize you for maximum output.
It sounds like it demands an extreme level of energy, both mental and physical. Maybe even an unsustainable level for most people long term.
That's a key question. The vocabulary is all about forcing breakthroughs, conquering obstacles, driving forward relentlessly, viewing the world as something to be pushed against and mastered.
Okay, that's pillar 1, achievement, external. intense. What's pillar 2?
Then you turn to pillar 2, the art of fulfillment. And this is positioned as the internal orientation. Theoretically, it's designed to balance out that aggressive external drive.
Fulfillment. Inner peace, happiness, that kind of thing.
Supposedly. This pillar focuses on managing your internal resources, things like state management independent of circumstances.
Meaning feeling good no matter what's happening outside.
That's the idea. The ability to find peace, feel grateful, even when external results aren't great or are totally absent. It promotes an appreciation versus expectation framework.
So gratitude over desire.
Encouraging deep gratitude for what you have rather than relentlessly desiring more. The stated goal is sustainable inner peace. Contentment.
Wait, look closely at the architecture you said. How do you achieve that inner peace according to this pillar?
Yes. This is where it gets really interesting and contradictory. This pillar, the one about inner peace, explicitly connects right back to that dubious methodology we just dissected. It includes, as a core technique for achieving fulfillment, the 90-second rule for emotional reset.
Wow. Okay, so the internal, serene state of fulfillment is structurally dependent on the external, decisive act of emotional override.
Precisely. An act often learned through the jolt of external authority in that high-intensity environment.
So the success of your inner peace is literally tied to your ability to perform this quick, decisive, almost violent emotional surgery on yourself.
A technique taught to you in a high-demand, high-intensity, externally focused setting. The methodology for achieving peace is itself a high-demand, high-intensity pattern break.
Which brings us right back to that key tension point you mentioned earlier. The central logical contradiction seems unavoidable here.
Absolutely. The system promises fulfillment, which implies a state of sustainable, internal, maybe even low-demand existence.
Yeah, calm, peaceful.
But it promises to deliver it through a methodology deeply rooted in achievement, which demands obsessive, intense, external, high-demand focus.
The tension isn't just philosophical, is it? It sounds behavioral, maybe even neurochemical.
I think it is. You're basically asking your brain to maintain two conflicting neurochemical profiles at the same time. Achievement thrives on things like dopamine, norepinephrine alertness, drive, focus, the mindset of the hunter, you could say.
Right, go, go, go.
Whereas fulfillment, true contentment, likely involves more serotonin, GABA calmness, gratitude, acceptance, the mindset of the sage, perhaps.
So does the aggressive, intense focus and that massive action required for the achievement pillar fundamentally undermine the sustainable, maybe quieter fulfillment it also promises?
Our analysis strongly suggests yes. The constant demand for output that achievement requires seems to perpetually violate the conditions needed for fulfillment. Things like rest, passive state management, acceptance.
You're constantly chasing a state, achievement, using methods that seem incompatible with the other state, fulfillment, you claim to already possess through gratitude.
It sets up the structural warfare inside you. And because achievement is more tangible, more easily measured, and more socially rewarded in many cultures,
It usually wins.
it seems the science of achievement, being the more externally reinforced pillar, almost always wins the battle for your resources, your time, your energy, your focus. Often leaving the art of fulfillment as, well, just nice rhetoric. Something to manage the inevitable burnout from the relentless achievement drive rather than a truly balanced counterpart.
Okay, this feels like the moment to bring down what you call the deconstructionist hammer.
Let's do it.
We promised to expose the machinery, right? And this section really focuses on that core systemic contradiction we keep circling back to.
Which is?
The system's greatest vulnerability, arguably, is that it claims to deliver radical self-sufficiency. You are the master now. Yet its entire structure seems to require external charismatic authority just to function properly.
This really revolves around the concept of the guru as necessary catalyst.
Explain that.
It's the core belief, whether it's explicitly marketed this way or just implicitly accepted by participants, that Robbins' decades of practice, his unique energy, his timing, that they create an intervention precision that is basically irreproducible by anyone else.
So the sheer force, the timing, the charisma needed for the most effective pattern interruption, the jolt.
The implication is that only he, or maybe his most trusted, highly trained associates, can really perform it at maximum scale and maximum effect.
Okay, think about that contradiction for a moment if you're listening. You might spend thousands, tens of thousands of dollars to gain tools for your own mastery, only to realize, maybe subconsciously, that the moment of deepest, most profound change, that moment you felt you finally broke through, was entirely dependent on a single external, non-replicable source of energy and authority.
You can learn the techniques, maybe, but you can't replicate the initial seismic force of that change without the original source, the guru.
Which leads directly to what you termed the authority paradox.
Exactly. The rhetoric, the each one teach one principle, it promises scalability. It suggests this system can spread globally, democratizing change like some kind of self-help virus.
Sound great?
But the reality, the operational reality, seems to be this unique, necessary requirement of charismatic authority. How can a system be truly universally scalable if its most powerful component, that charismatic jolt, is fundamentally non-transferable?
It can't be.
It feels like a closed-loop dependency, cleverly disguised as an open-source tool available to everyone.
And how is this structural contradiction sustained? How does it keep working?
Well, it seems to be sustained by effectively manipulating the evidence hierarchy critique.
Evidence hierarchy.
Yeah, the idea that some forms of evidence are stronger or more reliable than others. The system structurally, consistently privileges anecdotal transformations over systematic, empirical validation.
Let's be really clear about what anecdotal evidence provides. It's powerful stuff.
Oh, incredibly powerful. It's immediate, it's dramatic, it's highly emotional, and for the participant who's just spent a lot of money and energy, it instantly validates the whole premise. Anecdotes are fantastic proof of concept in that high-stakes, high-energy environment. But they are massively vulnerable to bias, selection bias. First off, the people who have those dramatic breakthroughs are often the ones who are already primed for it, maybe more resilient, more affluent, more ready for that specific kind of emotional experience.
And confirmation bias too, presumably.
Huge confirmation bias. That moment of breakthrough, which is directly tied to the authority figure's intervention, confirms the authority figure's unique effectiveness in the participant's mind.
Meanwhile, objective, longitudinal, peer-reviewed studies.
They're slow, they're often dry, they might be inconclusive, they don't make for great marketing sizzle reels.
So by consistently favoring the dramatic, high-impact story,
the system creates a kind of structural immunity to objective, long-term critique. It doesn't need the boring science if it has enough emotionally charged, compelling stories circulating.
the dependency gets woven right into the narrative itself.
Exactly. The story becomes, I needed his force, his energy, his unique precision to finally break my lifelong pattern. That single phrase, repeated enough times, ensures the guru's necessity is never really questioned, even while the participant is simultaneously professing their newfound self-mastery. It's quite ingenious, structurally. #6, historical precedents and therapeutic lineage.
Okay, let's pull back the lens even further now. Let's place this whole framework in a broader historical context.
Yes, this is crucial, because it helps reveal why this kind of format, regardless of its logical inconsistencies or dependency issues, can be so wildly effective, especially on a mass scale.
It's important for you, listening, to understand that this methodology, it didn't just spring out of nowhere, right? It's a sophisticated synthesis of things that have come before.
Absolutely. We see clear genealogical precedents, historical models for mass, high-intensity experiences designed to bypass the rational mind and induce rapid change.
Such as?
Well, think about the high-energy environment, the mass emotional discharge, the focus on catharsis. There are strong echoes of 18th century religious revivalism.
Really? How so?
Those movements used high-volume, intensely emotional settings, often involving powerful music, chanting, physical movement as a core mechanism for spiritual conversion, for inducing an instant state change in belief.
The goal was to bypass critical thinking.
Essentially, yes. To create a powerful belief state through a shared, intense, often overwhelming experience, a kind of high-energy jolt to the system, leading to conversion.
Okay, that's the religious angle. What about secular history?
In more recent secular history, you see clear parallels with things like EST, Erhard Seminars training, and its successor, the Landmark Forum.
Ah, yes. Known for being quite confrontational.
Exactly. These systems really popularized confrontational pattern disruption methods, often leading to those immediate, intense emotional breakthroughs, that feeling of suddenly getting it. They specialize in identifying your personal rackets or limiting beliefs and attacking them head-on in a group setting.
But what's the critical historical lesson from those kinds of approaches? Did the changes stick?
That's the key question. Longitudinal studies of those high-intensity jolt-based methods often showed pretty mixed outcomes when it came to durable long-term change.
So the immediate shock didn't always translate.
Not always into long-term sustainable behavioral shifts. which really highlights the potential difference between a high-intensity jolt administered by an external authority in a specific context.
And sustainable, internalized, self-directed rewiring that you manage yourself over time.
Precisely. Now, to be fair, the Robbins framework is a massive synthesis. It absolutely incorporates established, even proven, techniques from various therapeutic fields. This is its therapeutic lineage.
So it's not all smoke and mirrors. It borrows from legitimate sources.
Definitely. It integrates core elements, for instance, from NLP foundations, neurolinguistic programming.
Right. NLP focuses on things like modeling excellence, managing your internal state, using specific language patterns for change.
Correct. And it also borrows quite heavily from cognitive behavioral elements.
Yeah.
Things like identifying and restructuring negative thought patterns.
But traditional CBT is usually slow, right? Iterative work, often one-on-one.
Exactly. The framework takes these CBT-like elements, but applies them with significantly more intensity, more speed, and focuses on mass application in that large group, high-energy setting.
And underpinning all of it.
Underpinning it all is the spirit of the human potential movement. That focus on achieving peak performance, maximizing your individual capacity, accessing transcendent states through applied psychology, often very quickly.
So the real innovation here isn't necessarily inventing brand new components.
Not entirely. It's more about synthesizing these existing, often validated components, some high impact, some slower paced, and delivering them through this single, charismatic, high energy, highly scalable package.
But the underlying philosophy, the approach to suffering and change, seems quite different from other traditions. You mentioned comparing it to Stoicism.
Yes, I think the comparison to Stoicism is incredibly clarifying. It really highlights the fundamental philosophical divergence, especially around that core issue of external dependency versus internal mastery.
How so?
Well, the Robbins approach, as we've discussed, focuses intensely on suffering elimination through pattern control. The bad pattern must be identified and broken now. This requires decisive action, often external intervention, maybe the guru's force, the application of that 90-second rule. It's an aggressive, interventionist stance towards your internal state.
Okay. And Stoicism?
Stoicism, conversely, focuses on suffering transformation through perception management. It teaches you to radically accept what you cannot control, to carefully separate external events from your internal judgment of those events, and to focus primarily on cultivating internal virtue, wisdom, justice, courage, temperance.
So self-mastery comes through developing a rational philosophy.
Exactly. An internal framework for interpreting the world and managing your responses. Crucially, no charismatic authority figure is required. The tools are philosophy, reason, self-reflection.
Which brings us right back to that central tension, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. One system seems to necessitate dependency on external authority, at least for the initial jolt of clarity and state change. The other relies entirely on developing an internal philosophical framework that can, theoretically, operate autonomously and sustainably over the long haul through your own effort. It's a profound difference in approach. #Check7, the empirical and scientific gaps. The logical deception.
All right, it feels like time to really apply the scalpel now. Let's scrutinize the quality of the evidence, the claimed results, using what you call the evidence quality matrix based on our source analysis.
Yes, we need to categorize the different forms of proof the system leverages and evaluate their strengths and weaknesses objectively.
Okay, what are the main categories you identified?
We found basically 4 main categories of evidence being used. First, and perhaps most visibly, anecdotal stories.
The big dramatic transformation tales.
Exactly. Their strength is undeniable. Unmatched emotional impact. They're compelling, memorable, inspiring. Their limitation, however, is bias. Massive selection bias, confirmation bias, basically bias upon bias.
Meaning they tell you very little about whether it works for the average person.
Right. They provide almost zero reliable predictive data for the general population. They're chosen because they're exceptional.
Okay, anecdotes. What's next?
Second, participant testimonials. These are incredibly potent, especially immediately after an event.
The videos of people raving right after a seminar.
Precisely. Their strength is that immediate, palpable post-event enthusiasm. It feels authentic, and it powerfully validates the high investment of time, money, and emotional energy.
But the limitation here is...
A huge limitation is the Hawthorne effect. This is a core psychological phenomenon you really need to understand.
Explain that for listeners.
The Hawthorne effect basically means people tend to change their behavior and often report improved outcomes simply because they know they're being observed or because they feel special for being part of an exciting high-status group or experiment.
Ah. So just being in the seminar environment influences the outcome report.
Absolutely. Imagine you're there, one of thousands of people. You've maybe spent a significant amount of money. You've jumped, you've cheered, you've maybe cried in front of strangers. The social pressure to validate that intense, profound experience afterwards is enormous.
You need to believe it worked.
You almost have to tell yourself and others that it was life-changing,
Uh,
which powerfully fuels the positive testimonial machine regardless of objective long-term change.
Okay, so anecdotes, testimonials, what's the third category? This seems crucial.
Third, and critically important from a scientific standpoint, we look for longitudinal peer-reviewed studies.
Right, the gold standard. Objective, verifiable, long-term data tracking the durability of the changes over months or years conducted by independent researchers.
Exactly. Their strength is objectivity, minimizing bias, their limitation. In this context, they are critically minimal, sorely lacking, especially independent replication.
So there's a structural hole in the evidence base, right where you'd expect the strongest proof to be.
A massive hole. And this ensures the system is rarely, if ever, subjected to the kind of rigorous objective scrutiny that might actually disprove, or at least seriously challenge, core claims like the 90-second rule.
Okay, and the fourth category of evidence.
Fourth is neuroscientific validation. The system often uses neuro buzzwords. The strength here is theoretical alignment. The concepts sound like they should work, given brain plasticity, but the limitation is that direct, specific testing of the core claims is scarce to non-existent.
Which brings us nicely to the neuroscientific interface, supported versus contested elements. You're saying the system does lean on some established science, right, to give it that veneer of authority.
It does. There are two main areas where it rightly connects to established science. One, the neuroplasticity foundation. The brain can change its pathways. That's true. Through focused repetition, intense experiences, new learning, pathways can be reconfigured.
Okay, plasticity is real. What's the second one?
Second, state-dependent learning. This is also well established. Information, memories, and new emotional patterns are processed and stored differently depending on the emotional state you're in when you learn them.
So if you teach someone a new positive behavior while they're in a peak, high-energy, feel-good state,
They are potentially more likely to retain that positive emotional link to the behavior. It gets anchored to that state.
okay, so those elements are scientifically sound, in principle, but where does the science fall apart, according to the critique? What are the contested elements?
It mainly falls apart on the arbitrary specifics of the methodology, the exaggerated claims.
Like the 90-second rule again.
We have to keep circling back to the 90-second empirical gap. It's the linchpin, but it fails to account for fundamental biological reality. We're not just talking about the quick electrical firing of a neuron. We're talking about the whole neuroendocrine system.
The hormones.
Right. Hormones like cortisol and adrenaline, released during stress or strong emotion, require sustained metabolic activity to be cleared from your bloodstream. This often takes many minutes, sometimes even hours, especially if the initial stressor was intense or the person is chronically stressed. You can't just will them away in 90 seconds.
Okay. What else is contested?
Furthermore, the grand claim of suffering elimination is deeply contested because it runs contrary to basic evolutionary psychology.
How so?
Negative emotions, things like appropriate levels of stress, fear, sadness, frustration, they aren't bugs in the system to be eliminated. They are functional tools developed over millennia of human evolution.
They serve a purpose.
A vital purpose. They protect us. They motivate us to change course. They force necessary processing of loss or danger. They provide crucial information about our environment and our internal state.
So trying to eliminate functional negative states could actually be dangerous.
Potentially profoundly dangerous, yes. If you successfully manage to terminate the, let's say, 90-second frustration you feel because your business strategy is clearly failing, well, you've just eliminated the internal pressure to actually change the failing strategy.
Or if you terminate the fear response to a genuinely dangerous situation.
You terminate your survival instinct. The complete lack of nuance here, the idea that all negative feeling is suffering to be instantly eradicated, is a major potential liability of the system.
And this lack of nuance, the empirical gaps. This leads us to what you identified as the critical failure points of the system for many participants.
Yes, there seem to be two major points where the system breaks down in practical application for a lot of people.
The first one.
The first is the universal application problem. The system accounts very poorly for crucial individual differences. Differences in innate temperament, in trauma history, in neurodivergence.
Meaning the one-size-fits-all approach doesn't fit all.
Not at all. A high-intensity, maybe confrontational intervention, that charismatic jolt might be momentarily successful, even exhilarating for a naturally resilient, extroverted, low-trauma individual. But for someone with a complex trauma history, or maybe high sensitivity, or certain forms of neurodivergence, that same intense, overwhelming approach could be severely re-traumatizing. Or it could lead to an immediate shutdown state, a dissociative response.
And the framework doesn't really account for that variability.
It seems to offer very little recourse or adaptation for that. The intensity of the intervention is customized to fit the system's model, not necessarily the individual's actual neurological or psychological constraints.
Okay, that's a big one. What's the second critical failure point?
The second major point is the sustainability question. The long-term durability of these rapid, intense emotional transformations is highly questionable without ongoing support.
Sport
Like ongoing engagement with the community built around the system, or repeated attendance at events, or continuous consumption of the related products and coaching. Essentially, ongoing charismatic guru support, direct or indirect.
Why? Because the initial breakthrough relied on that external force.
Exactly. If the initial powerful breakthrough required that external jolt, that borrowed certainty from the authority figure, then maintaining that highly charged, perhaps hyper-positive state without constant external reinforcement becomes a massive challenge.
A challenge most people fail to meet.
It seems so. That peak breakthrough state, achieved in the high-energy environment, is often, unfortunately, a psychologically and biologically unsustainable peak for day-to-day life. The system gets you high, but doesn't necessarily equip you to stay balanced when you come back down to reality.
Okay, so if the science is shaky in key areas, the internal logic has major contradictions, and the long-term sustainability is questionable. Why does the whole machine remain so incredibly appealing? So potent for so many people?
Now we get into the social dynamics, the machinery of charisma and scale. Let's explore that appeal mechanism. How does the power of the charismatic authority manage to override what might seem like natural skepticism?
It must leverage some specific psychological mechanisms, right, to create that authority dependency we talked about.
It definitely does. First, there's a powerful phenomenon we could call charismatic transfer.
Transfer.
Yeah. Participants often attend with the belief, maybe conscious or unconscious, that the sheer force of the guru's certainty, his unwavering confidence, his palpable emotional intensity can somehow be absorbed by them, transferred to them.
Like osmosis.
Almost. They feel they can borrow his certainty to finally execute the change they couldn't manage alone. It temporarily bypasses the hard work of building true internal mastery and conviction.
It's like believing you can just download the driver for a new skill, like confidence, directly from the master's operating system.
That's a great analogy. You don't feel you need to do the difficult internal coding yourself. You just need the external plug-in from the charismatic source.
And this reinforces the dependency.
Hugely. It creates what we might call the pattern interruption privilege. The underlying belief established is that only the authority figure, the one with decades of specialized experience and this almost mystical emotional precision, only he can legitimately and safely disrupt your deepest, most embedded, lifelong negative patterns.
So you need the master disruptor to fix your biggest, scariest flaws. You can't do it yourself.
That's the implicit message that reinforces the dependency. And here's where it gets really profoundly ironic. The dehypnotization paradox.
Dehypnotization paradox.
The system often frames itself as waking you up, as dehypnotizing you from your limiting beliefs or from a negative cultural trance.
Right, I'm going to break your conditioning.
Exactly. But to do that, it requires creating its own hypnotic-level high-influence environment. Think about it. The dramatic lighting, the loud pulsing music, the mass emotion, the call-and response, the physical jolts, the intense focus on the single charismatic leader.
It's a highly suggestive environment.
Extremely. So they essentially fight fire with fire. They use techniques of mass influence and heightened suggestion to supposedly break the influence of past conditioning or perceived cultural hypnosis.
But the structural result is?
The structural result is often simply exchanging one form of dependency on your old patterns or the cultural trance for a new dependency. Dependency on the guru trance, on the system, on the feeling you get in that specific environment.
It's brilliant psychological engineering in a way.
It really is. You feel like you're finally awake, you feel empowered, liberated, but you might now just be awake within a newly constructed reality, one that is highly dependent on the system and its leader for continued validation and reinforcement.
Okay, let's shift from the individual psychology to the larger social architecture flaws, particularly around the claims of scalability.
Right. The source critique we analyzed points out a really interesting tension here. Despite the rhetoric about changing the whole world, reaching everyone,
Yeah.
the intense, truly personalized intervention methods, the ones involving direct interaction, physical engagement, the powerful charismatic jolt, seem to have practical limitations. They often cap out at around 2,500 participants for what the organization itself might define as an intimate intervention setting.
Intimate with 2,500 people.
Relatively speaking, yes. A setting where true personalization and maybe that direct physical pattern disruption can still somewhat occur.
So this cap on intimacy, that feels like a massive structural flaw if the core promise relies on those specific interventions.
It really is. If the charismatic jolt and the highly personalized pattern disruption are the real keys to profound, life-altering change, and those techniques only truly work effectively up to a certain density of people,
then the promise of truly universal global change delivery is severely limited by sheer physical capacity, isn't it?
it is. It strongly suggests that the truly massive events, the ones with 10,000 people or more, might be functioning more as high-energy marketing funnels, generating revenue and powerful testimonials, rather than delivering that specific, deep, personalized intervention that's often implied as the core mechanism.
Which brings us inevitably to the practical reality of economic accessibility.
Yes. The very high cost of attending these events, especially the multi-day ones, creates a significant barrier to entry.
Which leads to?
It leads to demographic homogeneity. Despite the claims of universal applicability, this is for everyone, the participants are often, by necessity, self-selecting from a relatively affluent, financially stable demographic, often, though not exclusively, Western.
And this self-selection has an impact on the methodology itself.
It seems to embed a core Western individual achievement focus right into the DNA of the methodology. The system becomes perfectly designed for the kind of person who has likely already achieved a fair amount of external success, but feels unfulfilled internally. The successful but stressed executive, for example.
It's less designed for.
It seems fundamentally less designed or perhaps less relevant for someone struggling with true systemic poverty, lack of basic resources, chronic health issues requiring medical care, or deep societal oppression. Issues that require systemic change or medical intervention, not just a 90-second emotional override technique.
So the claim of universality is undermined by the price tag.
Significantly. The system, perhaps unintentionally due to its cost structure, ends up primarily servicing the anxieties and fulfillment gaps of the already relatively successful, rather than addressing the foundational needs of those genuinely struggling at the bottom of the socioeconomic ladder. #TagOmegaX. Critical synthesis and conceptual tensions.
Okay, we've really taken the machine apart now. We've looked at the blueprint, the engine, the evidence, the historical context, the social dynamics. Let's try to pull it all together in a critical synthesis for everyone listening.
Right. Let's recap and crystallize the core issues. First, to be clear, the Robbins framework is undeniably a significant phenomenon. It's a very high-energy synthesis of various, often effective, therapeutic and coaching techniques focused intensely on driving achievement.
And its main innovation is?
Its innovation lies primarily in the aggressive methodology of emotional pattern disruption, and crucially, its delivery at scale through this highly charismatic, event-driven model.
But, as we've spent the last while detailing, the structural issues we've uncovered create significant problems. Real volatility.
Exactly. We can really summarize the entire critique, I think, into the 5 key conceptual tensions that define the system's core contradictions and, arguably, its unsustainability for many.
Okay, let's list them out. Tension number 1.
Number 1, universal application versus charismatic dependency. The promise that anyone, anywhere can use these tools clashes directly with the structural, seemingly necessary requirement for the unique, non-replicable power of the guru figure to initiate the most profound, lasting change.
Got it. Tension number 2.
Number 2, scientific framing versus anecdotal evidence. The system borrows the language of science neuroplasticity, conditioning, rewiring to lend itself authority, but its actual evidence base relies overwhelmingly on emotionally compelling stories and testimonials, which structurally allow it to bypass the need for rigorous, objective, long-term scientific validation.
Makes sense. Tension number 3.
Number 3, self-sufficiency rhetoric versus guru requirement. The participant is explicitly told, you are the power, you are in control. Yet the most effective interventions, the big breakthroughs everyone talks about, are often irreproducible outside the presence or influence of the charismatic authority. This ensures a systemic need for return engagement, more seminars, more products.
Okay. Tension number 4.
Number 4, suffering elimination promise versus human evolutionary reality. The system's core promise to terminate negative, often functional states within an arbitrary time frame, like 90 seconds, fundamentally ignores the protective, motivating, and informative role that things like stress, frustration, and fear actually play in human survival, adaptation, and necessary emotional processing.
And the 5th key tension.
And finally, number 5, pattern disruption focus versus pattern integration necessity. The entire methodology is aggressively geared towards breaking patterns, almost treating the self like faulty software that needs debugging or deleting. It underemphasizes or ignores the crucial psychological necessity of integrating functional, albeit sometimes inconvenient, emotional and behavioral patterns into a stable, coherent, and sustainable sense of self.
You can't just shout your innate temperament out of existence, basically.
Exactly. Some patterns aren't meant to be broken. They're meant to be understood, managed, and integrated into who you are.
So if we were to take the powerful parts of the methodology, the energy, the focus on action, maybe some of the NLP techniques, but strip away the dependency, the unscientific claims, the problematic aspects, what would a reform system look like? Do the sources offer any reformulation proposals?
They suggest directions for creating a more robust, less dependent, more scientifically grounded system. 3 key areas stand out.
Okay, first.
First, there would need to be a crucial element of temperament-informed application. The one-size-fits-all, high-intensity approach has to end.
Meaning?
Meaning the system needs to account for innate, stable personality dimensions. You could use something like the widely accepted ocean model of personality, openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism as a framework.
How would that change things?
Well, someone who scores high on neuroticism, meaning they're prone to anxiety and negative emotions, or maybe low on extroversion, likely requires lower intensity, more gradual behavioral change strategies. They probably shouldn't be subjected to a sudden confrontational jolt in a crowd of thousands. The intervention must match the individual's psychological hardware.
Makes sense. What's the second proposal?
Second, we desperately need adaptive suffering recognition. The system needs to teach participants to clearly distinguish between genuinely pathological states that do need intervention, like chronic debilitating anxiety or depression, and functional adaptive negative states. Things like short-term performance anxiety before a presentation, necessary grief after a loss, or the stress signal telling you a deadline is approaching.
And what do you do with functional negative states?
Those functional states need to be listened to, managed, maybe redirected, but not instantly terminated. They contain valuable information. Aggressively trying to eliminate them is counterproductive and potentially harmful. The nuance is critical.
Okay. And the third, reformulation.
And third, the biggest shift needs to be towards a distributed authority model. The ultimate goal must shift away from reliance on the guru.
Toward what?
Towards teaching genuine meta skills. The ability for individuals to accurately assess their own state, to apply gradual, appropriate self-correction techniques, and to rely on internal, rational frameworks and self-compassion. This would completely reduce, ideally eliminate, the dependency on the guru as the unique, necessary source of pattern interruption power.
So shift the focus from needing that single, powerful jolt from the outside
to building sustainable, continuous, self-directed practice from the inside, empowering the individual truly, not just rhetorically.
So ultimately, the takeaway is that the maximum utility of the useful components within this system, the NLP, the state management ideas, the focus on action, it really only emerges if they're integrated carefully.
Yes, integrated with complementary frameworks. Frameworks that fully acknowledge biological constraints, individual temperament, the reality of trauma history, and the necessity of sustainable, self-directed practice over the long term.
Because the current form seems optimized differently.
The current form appears optimized for maximum immediate impact, dramatic testimonials, and, structurally, for creating necessary dependency to keep the ecosystem running. True self-mastery, the kind that lasts, requires acknowledging and learning to work with the parts of yourself you can't simply shout away or erase in 90 seconds.
It requires integrating the parts that struggle, not just trying to eliminate them.
Precisely. Integration, not just disruption.
And that's our deep dive for this week. Remember, the most dangerous illusion is the one you don't know you're in.
But now you know. So here's our question for you. What's one self-help concept you've encountered that crumbled under logical scrutiny?
Let us know in the comments. Question the narrative. Deconstruct the dogma. See the system.
We'll see you next time. Stay skeptical. Thank you for joining us.